Hey everyone, this is Murph, and in today's video we will be discussing Windwalker Monk going into Midnight. Currently on the alpha, Windwalker feels very similar to how it does on the live servers, with some slight adjustments to some key talents and the renaming of certain spells. Windwalker gameplay revolves around building and spending chi, while trying to ensure that you don't overcap on chi, and also focusing on always having enough chi so that you can continue to cast your hard-hitting abilities with as little downtime as possible. Windwalkers also use energy to fuel the generation of chi, and want to try to avoid capping out on energy as much as possible by weaving in Tiger Palm casts frequently. Windwalker's mastery, Combo Strikes, causes your abilities to deal 8% more damage based off your current mastery when they are not a repeat of the previous ability. We also retain the talent Hit Combo, which further incentivizes this gameplay. What this means is that you will want to try and never repeat the same ability twice in a row if you can prevent it. This leads to a very engaging gameplay loop where you are always thinking about what your next cast will be, as you don't want to spam the same ability back to back. Moving into Midnight, Windwalker is seeing the loss of an iconic ability in the form of Storm, Earth, and Fire. This ability has been a staple of the spec ever since the class was released back in Mists of Pandaria. Seeing a monk split into 3 copies of themselves and start cleaving multiple targets all at once was always a really cool fantasy that I personally enjoy a lot, and I'll be sad to see it go. For my Heroes of the Storm enjoyers, Storm, Earth, and Fire is very similar to Samuro, the Orc Blade Master, who creates mirror images of himself to cleave down enemies. It's also ironic that the background for Windwalker Monk depicts what looks like an Orc Blade Master, and hell, I even named my monk on the live servers after this spell. However, I do understand why this ability is being removed, as having to rely on AI copies of yourself could lead to frustrating moments where players don't fully feel in control of their own damage. Storm, Earth, and Fire has been known to be pretty buggy from time to time, and you can accidentally cause all your images to focus on the same target in AoE if you spam the button too quickly when activating it. In place of Storm, Earth, and Fire, Blizzard is shifting our cooldown focus into a new ability called Zenith. Zenith is essentially just Weapons of Order renamed and functions identically to it, where our chi costs will be reduced by 1, and Blackout Kick will reduce the cooldown of affected abilities by an additional 1 second, with the added benefit of resetting Rising Sun Kick's cooldown when activated and granting you 2 chi. We still retain many of our core Windwalker talents that we're used to on live servers, such as Teachings of the Monastery, Hit Combo, and Zwen's Battle Gear. Some other familiar talents have had their functionality changed, such as Dance of Chi-Ji no longer increasing Spinning Crane Kick's damage, and Jadefire Stomp becoming a passive that procs at the end of your Fists of Fury channel. Some new talents that we gain access to include Skyfire Heal, which causes our Rising Sun Kick to cleave an AoE and gain additional extra critical strike chance for each nearby enemy. Martial Agility, which increases our melee attack speed by 30% or 60% when inside of Zenith. And Rushing Wind Kick, that has a chance to proc when you consume your free casts of Blackout Kick, causing Rising Sun Kick to become Rushing Wind Kick, that deals damage in a massive frontal cone in front of you when used. We have lost a few of our strong capstone talents, such as Last Emperor's Capacitor and Fury of Zwen, if you are a fan of those from the live servers. One very notable talent from the class tree is a new talent called Zenith Stomp, which causes you to stomp and deal AoE damage whenever you activate Zenith. This talent is currently very strong, and as a class tree talent, I expect this to get toned down a little bit. Windwalker's Apex talent is Tiger's Eye Brew, which was our old mastery back when Windwalker first got released, but now it's changed from its previous incarnation and they are just passive bonuses. Firstly, while in combat, you gain Tiger Eye Brew every few seconds, hasted, causing your critical strike chance to be increased by 2% during your next Zenith, stacking up to 20 times. This generates quickly up to 10 while out of combat. Next, your critical strike damage is increased by 20%. And lastly, you have a chance equal to your critical strike to increase the damage of your Fists of Fury by 15% each time that it deals damage. Both of our hero talents, Shado-Pan and Conduit of the Celestials, are familiar to their live versions, but have had some changes to their core functionalities and how they work. Shado-Pan still revolves around flurry strikes, but unlike on live, flurry strikes are now generated via auto attacks instead of dealing a certain amount of damage. We have a few key talents that play into this, such as martial agility, which increases our attack speed, one versus many, which causes our auto attack critical strikes to generate double the amount of flurry charges, and Tiger Fang, which increases our auto attack critical strike chance by 15%. We also now trigger flurry strikes whenever we cast Fists of Fury, instead of proccing flurry strikes via energy consumption, which feels a lot smoother as we will now always know when flurry strikes is going to be happening. Currently on the alpha, flurry strikes can stack all the way up to 30 times, and it is quite the light show when you proc it via Fists of Fury, and can sometimes seem like a never-ending stream of flurry strikes when stacked fully, but it is very visually appealing and fun to use. Conduit of the Celestials still retains its functionality and bursty cooldown gameplay from the live servers, but with one pretty massive change. Zwen, the White Tiger, is now no longer an option in the Windwalker talent tree, and is now the first talent node inside of Conduit of the Celestials. Activating Zwen will then turn your Zwen button on your action bars into Celestial Conduit, that is the channeled ability that deals massive damage and procs all of your Celestials at once that we currently have on live. Thematically, it makes sense to put Zwen into this hero talent tree, however, I definitely noticed the loss of this cooldown when I was playing Shado-Pan. Currently, Celestial Conduit hits incredibly hard, and I was deleting entire packs of enemies with just a single cast of this ability. One thing I noticed while playing is that since Celestial Conduit is now locked behind pressing Zwen, and Conduit can be used within 1 minute of using Zwen, if I didn't immediately use Celestial Conduit, my next Zwen would become available, but Celestial Conduit would still be on cooldown, as it has its own separate cooldown from Zwen that you can't currently see since they share the same button. This felt pretty clunky, and I would like to potentially see Celestial Conduit just immediately become available anytime that you activate Zwen. Aside from that change to Zwen and Celestial Conduit, this hero talent tree is very familiar and will have you proccing the various Celestials to help you deal damage, has a heavy focus on refunding stacks of Teaching of the Monastery, and can increase cooldown recovery rate of some of your abilities. I personally think that this hero talent tree is very visually appealing, and the bursty nature of Celestial Conduit paired with Zwen is a really fun gameplay loop. With all of that said, Windwalker feels very similar to how you know it if you are a current Windwalker player. The gameplay of Windwalker is highly engaging, with the core mechanic of our mastery, combo strikes, incentivizing us to never repeat the same ability twice. Windwalker feels like it has a good mix of both AoE and single target damage right now, without having to sacrifice too much of one or the other. The removal of Storm, Earth, and Fire is definitely a noticeable visual loss. However, gameplay-wise, Zenith does feel pretty good, since we're not having to rely on clone AI to do our burst damage anymore. Shifting Zwen into the Conduit of the Celestials hero talent tree thematically makes sense, but I will say it is a pretty noticeable loss when I was playing Shado-Pan. The changes to flurry strikes in the Shado-Pan hero talent tree are a massive win, as we can now more reliably proc our flurry strikes exactly when we want to, instead of having to rely on spam dumping energy to get our flurry strikes to proc. The addition of some fun new talents such as Skyfire Heal and Rushing Wind Kick give Rising Sun Kick some massive AoE potential that the ability lacks currently on the live servers, just making our AoE rotation feel a little bit more impactful. Windwalker Monk has always been my favorite melee spec in WoW, and I'm happy to see that there aren't too many massive sweeping changes coming to the spec. It seems like Blizzard is primarily focused on improving the quality of life for Windwalker, while trying to keep things relatively the same as you know them on live. Windwalker Monk is currently one of my top contenders for my new main going into Midnight. What are your thoughts on these changes? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Peace out.